All right. Happy Friday or Monday or Wednesday or whenever you guys are listening to this. This is another episode of the Real Estate Investing Club. And today we have Josh Shein with us from Trias Lending. Josh is a expert on the lending side, which is a very, very touchy subject in today's market with the high interest rates. He
Yes,
is
it is.
also a flipper and he does multifamily. So a lot of experience here to jump into. Josh, I am super excited to jump into this. Thank you very much for hopping on the show.
Really glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I told you before we hopped on here, we like stories. We like to start here how you got to where you are. So why don't you take us back to the beginning? How'd you get started in real estate?
The short story. Hopefully, I'll be short with it. It's family. That's the first thing, right? So my
Easy.
grandfather, my uncle, my dad, real estate
Ah,
investing. I'm originally from Providence, Rhode Island, so a New England native, and real estate goes back in the family as long as I can remember. Growing up with my dad, going to pick up some rent checks, and I'd be in the car on a Sunday when he had to, knock on some doors, right? Old school. So I always grew up around it, always loved it, was always really interested in it. Fast forward, I was in a business with my dad, and we ended up selling that business, a medical company, and we ended up sort of each going some different directions. He went into some other finance, and I got into mortgages, and I got into traditional mortgages, traditional lending, residential refis, purchases, etc. Fast forward after 14, 15, 16 years, very successful on a national level and some large companies in that world. I really was getting a little tired of the regulatory environment and not having that relationship side of really being able to build with people and connect with people on an ongoing basis. And I reconnected with someone who I had known, who's now my partner, Steve Bond, him and his son, David. And we all got together, and he had been doing hard money lending. And I said, I'd love to really scale this up and be a part of growing this thing. And we could really establish relationships differently, work a little more locally. I wouldn't have to travel as much. That all really appealed to me, and not as much paperwork and licensing either, which was nice. So long story short, we got together, and we've grown really exponentially over the past few years. It's been about 6 years now, and now we've got 63 million in loans out in the local marketplace. We've raised everything from friends and family. We don't have sort of institutions behind us, and it's been just incredibly successful. We're having a great time, and we love building those relationships, long-term relationships with all of our clients.
nice, man. I love it. And I've said this for other people who've come on the show who grew up in a real estate family. I am so jealous of having that background, being able to see it. Other if you had your dad taking you door
Right.
knocking, getting rent checks, stuff like that, that really does give you a solid foundation to kind of leapfrog from. So it sounds like you had a good background, and then you got into lending on the mortgage side. So what I'm just trying to figure out there's a lot of things to go into when you're talking about
Yeah.
lending.
Yeah.
And you guys are on the hard money side. Let's first, before we get into anything else, let's talk about the market today. We are in an environment where it's March 2023, almost April. Interest rates are not where they used to be. I know they're not as high as they
Yeah.
have been in the past. My
Yeah.
dad was saying, "Oh, back in the day, interest rates were 10%." But they are, they're higher than they were
Yeah.
a couple of years ago at 3%. It was just a
Certainly.
great time to be getting loans. But in today's market, where do you see the interest rates heading? We're at 7% right now. Do you
Yep.
see this as being the top? And if not, where do you see it going in the next, 1 to 2 years?
Right. No, great question. It's something we talk about, and it's obviously something we all try to figure out. And the first thing I would say is I'd preface any answer by saying no one can know for sure, right?
Yeah.
We're all just pontificating and sort of giving our best educated guess based on our years, based on our history. Having said that as well, history is always a guide, but there's always exceptions, right? With
Mm.
anything, whether it's stock market investing, real estate, et cetera. This has been a phenomenal run up we all ran into. And then COVID had its own sprinkled its own issues into it, right? Some good, some bad,
It's all
right?
flavor.
And
Yeah.
and then we come out of it, and then different issues with the economy, and different issues with inflation and wars, and all those things factor in. Having said all that, we knew rates were going to go up, right? So let me just start with that. We knew it was not sustainable to be looking at long-term rates in the 3s and 4s. That was never going to be sustainable. Now, whether our dads and our elders talk about the 15 and 16% in 1984, okay, I don't know that was really normal either. If you look at those averages over history and you look at where you feel like the market should be and where the numbers seem to make the most sense on the investing side, Wall Street side, the bond side, and then for us as real estate investors, my gut, and we sort of feel this way